Brian Ortega fights Aljamain Sterling in the co-main event of UFC Shanghai, and Ortega is generally known for getting the absolute snot beat out of him in title fights, and while he has made significant improvements in his striking, his main skill set still stands, and that is his incredibly dangerous Jiu Jitsu. So today we're going to be breaking down every one of Ortega's submission victories in the UFC to look at how deadly his ground game really is. So let's get into it. So against Diego Brandau, Brandau was very aggressive and almost immediately took Ortega down in the fight. Just a blast double against the fence, lifted him up, slammed him down, and went straight into Ortega's guard. Now this is, without a doubt, a terrible idea. And Ortega immediately was able to establish some sort of control with Brandau's posture, controlling the neck, controlling the arms a little bit, being able to get feet on the hips, and just being able to control him to an extent, right? In the third round, this happens again, but in a different scenario, right? Brandau's getting very aggressive, Ortega shoots under for a shot, and eventually ends up pulling guard, and again, he's able to control and manipulate Brandau to an extent. This happens a few more times where he tries to pull guard just standing. Now, it works a little bit, and eventually, Brandau sees Ortega coming forward, steps through on a big elbow. Now, the thing with elbows is you really don't need to throw your whole body into him. Brandau, in this case, he wants to be aggressive, he wants to be violent, he overthrows in the elbow, gives up his back. Ortega immediately latches on, grabs control of the wrist, grabs control of the back, and walks him to the fence. And he locks up a headlock and starts to sink in an anaconda choke. Very important, he gets the choke in first before he hits the mat. You have to have yourself higher than your opponent with these chokes so that there's less likelihood that they escape. So Ortega locks up the choke, gets to the mat, and starts beginning to circle around, which is really good. Eventually, Brandau starts circling the other way, and Ortega sees the opportunity to take mount, which he does. He gets in mount and begins to work on a mounted guillotine, switching his grip. Now, one very important thing is when he passes his legs over to get into mount, he doesn't pass his left leg over Brandau's shoulder. He leaves it next to the neck. Now that's really important because while it may be a little bit less control at the time, if Brandau starts to roll over, it means you can latch up a mounted triangle. This is what Pimblett was able to do against Bobby Green. And that's exactly what happens. And because of how Brandau was already turning and trying to get up, he immediately gets in a position where Ortega is almost parallel to Brandau with the triangle locked in. That's really good as it really does tighten the grip, and Ortega is able to get a hook around Brandau's leg, tighten the choke completely, and Brandau desperately taps. A very crafty submission from Ortega, where he was able to chain together different submissions and set them up very effectively. His fluidity and his ability to move through these deadly positions over and over again is a very impressive thing, especially for a Jiu-Jitsu player in MMA, where you see a lot of them don't actually get that many submissions. He's one of very few fighters that can still do that. Now for his submission victory over Renato Moicano, a win that is really impressive as Moicano, like Ortega at the time, was undefeated. So both men are very prominent Jiu-Jitsu players, so Moicano took him down early in the fight to establish that he wasn't afraid to go to the ground. And for the majority of the fight, Moicano was winning on the feet. However, in that third round, when Ortega shines, he puts a lot of pressure on Moicano. And Moicano isn't liking it. He's feeling it a little bit. So he shoots a double leg takedown and he shoots with his head on the outside. It's the third round, he's a bit tired, you can manipulate things a bit easier. So Moicano shoots with a double leg, Ortega again isolates the neck, and it's not in perfectly, but Moicano takes him down anyway. Ortega is really good at readjusting his submissions in the moment, similar to an Oliveira, right? It's what helped him get the submission against Cub Swanson as well. We'll talk about that a bit later, but he readjusts the grip to make it tighter. Now, the most important thing is, you can see Moicano trying to push down on the hips and escape, and he can't. That is because when you pull a guillotine on someone, you don't just have them, you can just have them in your guard, but Ortega gets a body triangle around their back. not necessarily on their back, but from guard pulling a body triangle. Joe Rogan talks about it a lot as a defensive position, as there's not a high likelihood that you're getting up. What he doesn't talk about is the fact that there's not a high likelihood that the other person is getting up either. It's very, very difficult to get out of someone's body triangle, regardless of whether it's on the top or the bottom. Ortega has this, and a locked-in guillotine. Moicano has essentially no way out of it, and because Ortega readjusted the grip, changed that minute little detail to make sure that choke was just a little bit tighter, and Moicano couldn't get out of it, and he obviously forced to tap. Really impressive to get this win over, such a game jiu-jitsu player, and again, I just like the fact that he went for the body triangle to help isolate the position a lot better, and just to see someone readjusting a submission, in the moment is always a great thing to see. So very impressive. Now, for without a doubt, his coolest submission came against Cub Swanson in his first main event. Now, Cub Swanson has a very, very unique style. It's a bit similar to TJ Dillashaw in a way. He's very in and out. He has a lot of flair with his movement. He has a lot of swagger. And he often dips his head side to side quite a lot on all of his strikes, and it allows for really, really slick head movement. But against a guy like Ortega, that can be exploited. And, consistently throughout the fight, Ortega would put pressure on him, throw boxing combinations, and Cub would slowly, move side to side, move his head down, and Ortega was able to get the clinch a handful of times, right? In those collisions where Cub comes forward, Ortega was able to grab and get a hold of him, often getting an underhook and then a collar tie around the back and then locking his hands, and he was able to go for knees. Now, Cub, instead of just being like, I'm going to get the hell out of here, he does try to play the knee game with Ortega. He tries to stay in close and get his own points off. Now, while I respect it, just always hustling in positions, being close with Ortega is very, very dangerous. He has I know his reach is only at 69 inches. He has very long arms and very long forearms, so he's able to reach over for those guillotine and those anaconda chokes very, very well. And eventually, right, he's in the clinch. He has that underhook and collar tie grip I was talking about before at the end of the first round. He drops that collar tie around to the back, so it's ready to be that bicep side. He then pummels his left hand over as Cub is, jamming his head into Ortega's chest and neck, as you do in the clinch typically when you're trying to do more Muay Thai. Ortega pummels his wrist over the top, and then cinches up the anaconda choke. And again, he gets the choke locked in first, then he trips Swanson to the ground, right? He's so quick at locking these submissions up, but he does prioritize getting in the right position first. And then eventually gets to the ground, starts rolling with Swanson, and tries to get on top, but the round does end. Now, Cub does a very good job in the beginning of the second round trying to stay upright, doing his best to not duck his head. But eventually, Ortega puts a lot of pressure on you. It's a fight. You get tired, go back to your instincts. That simply is Cub's style to change his levels a lot. And Cub was having a lot of success to the body. Eventually, they get into a clinch. Cub starts trying to play the knee game. Ortega starts trying to push him against the fence. Ortega entertains the knees for a little bit, and he shoots his own takedown. Obviously, right? Ortega shoots a single leg. You're going to drop your own level when someone shoots a takedown. Ortega recognizes the Cub has dropped his level, cinches up a guillotine, right? He tries to pull guard, but Cub has a very, very strong base. So Ortega locks his feet and readjusts the grip mid-air. He is quite literally hanging off of Cub. The level of squeeze and just an anaconda-like grip on someone that you have to maintain that position is truly incredible. One of the things that allowed him to obviously stay on Cub is a secure chin strap, right? That side that's on the neck, he is really holding onto that good. He's getting his shoulder and his posture over Cub, and also he's locking his legs behind Cub so that he, doesn't slide down as easy. These, submission positions that he gets in, they're all perfect. Every single thing that he's doing is correct, right? It's textbook, it's fundamental. But he adds a certain amount of flair to it that people aren't expecting, that you're just so surprised you get caught in these crazy submissions. Eventually he readjusts the grip while still dangling off of Swanson, and Swanson is forced to tap desperately, like he really wants out of that choke. So to just show that Ortega can get that level of squeeze and precision in what is ultimately not an ideal position is super impressive. And Cub has very good jiu-jitsu of his own, right? Cub's no slouch on the ground. It's just really, really damn cool. And if you haven't watched, I really do recommend watching this fight. It's one of his better performances. Now for his most recent victory, an incredible comeback against Yair Rodriguez, where Yair had a lot of success in the first round, knocking him down twice. Now, Ortega shoots for a single leg, not with the intent of getting the single leg. He wants Yair to try and give up his back, going for like an overhook on the single leg side. He does that, Ortega's able to get a hand around the back and circle through and get Yair to the ground for just a second before he gets up. But this continues. In the second round, Ortega's up against the fence trading with Yair, shoots under for a takedown and is able to pick him up and slam him. Now, instead of immediately going for the submission, Ortega starts to soften him up with ground and pound, as Yair isn't really defending himself on the ground all that well. So Ortega's just slowly sitting there, just chipping away at pretty solid ground and pound shots too. And this does work going into the third round, obviously tiring Yair out, hurting him, and getting responses on the ground. That's a big one. So when Ortega is finally able to get a body lock trip in the third round, Yair is more focused on defending the punches to his face than the terrifying jiu-jitsu that Brian Ortega has. Ortega is obviously going to pick up on the fact that Yair is going to start defending his face with his hands and gets an arm under the back of the neck and starts looking for a head and arm choke. Now, the really unique thing is when he steps over, typically you go palm to palm with a head and arm choke and you put your forehead to the mat. Instead, Ortega goes for like a rear naked choke grip. He's very, very proficient with that, it seems, and he prefers it over the traditional palm to palm. He can get a much better squeeze there. And normally, with a head and arm choke, you start circling out. He does the same thing, just with the applied grip. And Yair, again, desperately taps the amount of squeeze that Ortega can get on these positions so quickly. Is not just a testimony to his skill and talent, but also his dedication, right? To get that level of perfection, that level of squeeze, efficiency in the jiu-jitsu department is done by countless hours rolling on the mat over and over and over, consistent practicing of those submissions to the point where it becomes muscle memory. And that's what really Ortega's style is all about. It's that fighting instinct and having, these deadly attacks come in as just instinct, right? It comes so naturally to him now that he just can fight purely off of instinct. And while sometimes that does get him beaten up in the boxing department, it is amazing to watch on the ground. Now, I'm making this video because, obviously, Brian Ortega has a fight coming up against Aljamain Sterling. It's a co-main event, so it's 3 rounds. And when I first saw this, I'm like, okay, Aljamain's going to win, right? And I, wouldn't blame other people for thinking that either. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, how's Aljo going to win? I really don't know, right? Ortega's main weakness is people who have better boxing than him. Now, while, obviously Holloway and Volkanovski. Now, while Diego Lopez might not have better boxing than him, just pure hands for hands, he does have the power to, bridge that gap. He has that level of explosiveness and counter-striking. Aljamain Sterling is incapable of knocking, rocking, or hurting somebody. I'm well and truly convinced of that. And Ortega still has a really good chin. As much as he has been beaten up, he still hasn't been knocked out. And his chin and his recovery still looks really damn good. So I'm not betting on Aljamain to win a boxing match against Ortega, right? Now, jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu, it's pretty interesting. Because Ortega has shown a lot more proficiency in submissions. It's been a long time since Aljamain Sterling has gotten submissions, and it seems that he can't really submit people at the highest level other than Corey Sandhagen. Now, Ortega is submitting a high-level competition at featherweight, right? In terms of pure, jiu-jitsu, I'm leaning Ortega. In terms of striking, I'm leaning Ortega. The only thing, I could look at is wrestling, right? Now, Aljamain is a very, very good wrestler. Very good. Ortega is pretty comfortable on the ground, and I don't know if Aljamain's just going to want to constantly shoot on Ortega, considering how good he is with guillotines. And Ortega himself does have pretty good wrestling. It's nothing to, it doesn't pop out, but it's good, it's solid. It's, people don't necessarily, hug fest him. That doesn't happen. And I'm just looking at like each component of their skill set. I'm like, okay, this is what Ortega's good at. This is what Aljamain's good at. I'm looking and I'm saying, Ortega is better in most of these positions. And, again, you're losing to Diego Lopez because he hits hard is not a terrible thing. Getting outboxed by Max Holloway is not a terrible thing. Right? And Ortega still has shown to be pretty damn game. And I can't say to put money on him because it is Ortega. He does sometimes come into fights pretty out of shape, but he looks pretty good. Like, I've seen the videos he's posted on his YouTube. He looks pretty good. He looks motivated, right? There's Volkanovski's champion again. Gives him a bit more motivation. That's a guy that he can maybe beat. Volk's also on his way out, right? Who's the next guy that's probably going to be champ? Maybe Evloev, maybe Lopez. Because of the change up in the division, it's going to give Ortega a little bit more motivation. And again, aside, he looked good in the Yair fight. Aside from hurting himself really bad with his ankle and getting dropped, he came back like a bat out of hell. And he even had his moments against Diego Lopez in that fight. He was able to recover really, really well from those knockdowns and, go tit for tat with Lopez and win a lot of those exchanges until Lopez would land a blistering combination. And I just don't see someone like Aljamain Sterling doing that. He's incapable of it. So I would lean Ortega by decision. I don't see him submitting Aljamain. Aljamain is very, very good. And I don't think he gets enough credit for it. But I do see Ortega winning a pretty competitive fight, 29-28. Might even be a split, but I do see Ortega winning. Right? I believe in the Eagle. Anyway, guys, I just want to make that video. As I don't usually cover, primarily grappling on this channel. I'm more into striking, but I wanted to do something different. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you later.